upset. If we're gonna talk about being upset, I have plenty to be upset about.
We'll wind up Joe and just let him run for an hour.
Yeah, Joe's got a laundry list.
I went out because I knew it was gonna be on today. For once, it's like once every 3 or 4 months that my schedule and Steve's hangouts are working out. There's always something stupid that comes up. And the one thing in a month on a Sunday, it'll be the day that Steve's doing his hangout. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to be on today. My hair's getting a little out of hand, so I want to get my hair cut. Plus, I got to do my Breakfast Club video tonight. So okay, I'm going to go to the beauty salon. They open up at 10, and it's like, okay, I'll be able to get there, come back, and be presentable for the show. And I get in the chair with a woman. She seemed very nice, but she's apparently never touched a black person's hair in her history of her life. And
really? I thought people always touch black people's hair.
Is that stuff real, man?
I think she probably hadn't even done that. I mean, she's doing a part, and then she's combing down, what are you doing? It doesn't work that way.
Ouch.
Pretend I'm Italian.
How many weeks has this gal had a chair in front of her?
I mean to the point where not only she put a clip in to hold it, and she's combing down So I'm like, I get up and I'm like, no, you don't know what you're doing. I want somebody else. So then the manager comes over and she's like, okay, and then she's gonna do it, and then I told her it's 5 on the side, 7 on top, and then clean up with the scissors. And then she's like, then she just takes the clippers and she's like, well, I don't have the numbered thing. She starts to go no, 5 on the side, 7 on top, clean up with scissors. What part of do it the way I told you to don't you get? And so I was
she didn't get the way.
And I've been going to this place for 17 years. I figured it out on the way I was driving away. I'm like, I couldn't believe this. I've been going there for 17 years, and you still have people don't know how to, do my hair.
That's phenomenal.
That's disillusioning. I put in all this time.
Somebody's giving us an echo.
Well, yeah, I did hear an echo just now.
So that's why my hair's flat on this side, so I look like an idiot, or more of an idiot than normal.
Get a Floby.
Yeah. Or just do what I do and cut it at home and wear a hat all the time. See? The hat doesn't just hide hair, it hides a big brain.
If you cut it like mine, you don't even need a hat.
Hey, that's where and probably in another 5 or 10 years, that's where I'm headed because I won't have any choice.
That's why I cut it like mine.
It's retreating slowly but surely.
Welcome to the club, Steve.
I know. I look at my dad. My dad had a big, beautiful head of hair until he hit about 40, 45, and then it just was like, oh, where'd your hair go? It was
male pattern baldness.
It was just gone. So now he just shaves it.
Yeah,
he looks like Western Maryland's version of Patrick Stewart or something.
Yeah,
I keep thinking about chemistry teacher.
I keep thinking about getting into something like minoxidil, and it's not worth the money. It isn't.
Yeah, I know. When mine gets unattractively thin, I'm just gonna shave it off. I mean, who cares?
I haven't quite got there yet, but I got in a nice little empty spot here, which I basically use to guilt customers with when they give me a hard time.
This is you. This is your fault.
Speaking of which, just to sort of throw in a little bit, when I'm done with you guys here, I'm going to be finishing packing a bag and hiring myself off to the mystic land of Burlington, Vermont, where I'm going to help an old customer out with a deinstall and reinstall.
And buy a coat.
I'm sorry?
And buy a coat.
And buy a coat.
Oh, is it that cool up there? To be honest, I haven't even looked at the weather up there. I presume
I just mean Burlington Coat Factory.
They have a famous coat factory in Burlington.
Yeah. Number one, I suspect it's a different Burlington. Number two, there's a certain Big Blue that's up there that actually it's no longer Big Blue. It's now Global Foundries, where they came up with that one. I don't know. But it's basically what used to be IBM's chip manufacturing arm. And I've got a customer up there that I've had a relationship with since about 1991. And great people that they are, they want my help. And they're willing to pay for it, which is great.
Yay, money. Yeah, it's actually Burlington Coat Factory is actually originally out of Burlington County, New Jersey.
Ha!
Oh,
Huh.
hey.
New every day.
Oh my god.
Well, this is
Well, it
actually
makes sense
Essex
there'd be a factory
Junction.
in Jersey.
Was that?
Makes sense that there'd be a factory in New Jersey. Yeah.
Possibly more than one.
You know, I just want to. I mean, New Jersey gets a lot. New Jersey gets a lot of flack from people, but I just want to say, I mean, I've known lovely people from New Jersey, including Joe, and they are so nice in New Jersey. They will not let you pump your own gas.
I ran into that once at a Hess. You know, this was back in like the mid 70s, and you know everybody was getting into pumping your own gas. And I pull up to this Hess, and you know, I get ready to get out of my car. The guy says, "No, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it." They were really nice.
Yeah, I remember the first time I went to New Jersey. I was with some friends. We were driving up to. We were going to visit the town where they filmed some of the original Friday the 13th movie. Beautiful little small town. Like, it's not like a touristy place at all. It's just still very much as it has always been. And like half of it is situated on a hill. There's like a street that's just nothing. It's just on a 90-degree incline. It's ridiculous. 40-degree incline not 90-degree. And we stopped outside of town to get gas, and I wasn't driving, but when we pulled up to the pump, I started to get out, and my friend who was driving says, "No, stay in the car." And I was like, "What? Why? What's happening?" You know? And he's like, "No. It's all full service here. That you're not allowed to do self-serve." Oh, okay. Because for a second there, he was like, I thought he saw something. Like, you know, like, no, stay in the car.
Well, what's really funny is that people from around the country, they make light of that, and they make fun of us. And so what I like to do is when it's like the dead of winter, and I'm like, "Oh no, I can't get out in the driving snow. It's 3 degrees outside to pump my own gas. Oh, horror of horrors."
Damn you!
And I am distracted by the fact that John has a kitty on screen.
Oh, yeah.
Say hello to baby girl.
Oh, she's adorable.
What a
I've got a kitty cat right over here who's all crashed out, and I mean, I'd move my cam and show you, but I'd never get the cam right again.
When I was setting up my light and my backdrop earlier, my cat walked like 2 steps into the room, looked like she had just woken up from a nap, meowed at me once, kind of glared at me for a second, and then walked away. Like,
You're doing one of these things again, huh?
I'm sorry for whatever I did.
I don't approve.
I don't know what I did.
Why, Steve? Why is there too much light in my house?
Exactly.
Baby girl just doesn't like me talking to other people.
Who are you talking to? What's so interesting?
My cat, like, I only woke up like 20 minutes ago because I'm a night owl.
Yeah.
And I wake up and my cat is just nudging me all over and purring at me. I get up, I, get on my computer and stuff. She walks out and she's probably eating.
Say, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
You're not paying attention to me, you're just not worth it.
Exactly.
Pretty
What are you
much.
doing for me right now?
Yep.
Okay, well, I just wanted to bring this up. We'll just sort of drop this into the conversation. I hope everybody knows that. I mean, there was good news this week that apparently climate change doesn't exist because the EPA's climate change page was removed from its website the day before the climate march. The day before the climate march yesterday in DC. So
Okay,
everything's fine.
Problem solved. Good job, everyone.
It's interesting because about not quite a week ago, I actually decided I got pissed off enough, especially in the view of Dear Donnie's response to the March for Science, that I carved my second letter to the president. So far, I'm one for Obama and one for whatever you want to call it, crafted, blah blah blah.
I like cars.
Just imagine chiseling it in.
I make light with verbs sometimes because it's fun.
Making like a freaking rune stone and sending it to the president.
Make sure he reads this.
I considered cuneiform, but he'd probably take one look at that and go, "What?"
Yeah.
Well, those got pictures. He could probably read that.
Yeah, hieroglyphic.
It's about the only thing he would look at is this the scariest part. But I just got this bullshit thing he this bullshit he laid out about being all in favor of scientific inquiry and that it should be it should be about serious study and vigorous debate. And I mean, first of all, number one, he never said that. I mean, some speechwriter wrote that for him. And number two, sorry, but bullshit.
Well,
We did that
well,
for 70
especially-
years.
Well, especially,
It's over.
especially the irony of that, saying like, rigorous debate. Now let's take down the site that has the information I don't like.
Yeah, and let's gag all the scientists who work for the government who might have something to say about it that is actually intelligent.
The thing that pisses me off the most about it is that basically, okay, in the past, we've always dealt with people, largely on the right wing being climate deniers and science deniers, but they at least put up a front of like, okay, well, we just want to make sure, we got to get, make sure the science isn't in yet, blah, blah, blah. Now it's basically like, okay, there's the science. We're going to hide it, bury it, delete it. And so the thing is, at a certain level, that's an admission that they actually know they're wrong. And that's what's really extra fucked up about it, because it's one thing if you're really wedded to your position and you want to poke holes in the other guy's argument as much as you can, but when you get to the point where I have to hide it because if I don't, I lose. And so how do you hold on to a position that you know is wrong? I don't get that.
They're religious, right?
Yeah, the answer is you can't, because the bell's already been rung. The horses escaped the barn. I mean, whatever cliche you want to, cite, but the blunt end of the stick is we already know about it, and there are enough people who know about it that they're going to raise bloody hell if, these guys try to, enact, any serious policy.
Right, but these learn once you know that your position is wrong, and which means actually counter to your own benefit. If I knew that like eating the stuff from this pickle jar was poison, and I denied it for a long time, so I really like to taste the pickles, but eventually like it was like no poison, and I got test results and everything. And if I just said, if I just hide the results that say it's poison, I can keep eating it. That's insane.
It is.
What I'm worried
I found it
about
if
is
you guys
when
can hear
they
me.
said that they were going
I
to
can
break
hear you.
up the Ninth Circuit Court.
Yeah, let's talk about that in a second, because I do want to touch on that. Yeah, but I did hear you just now, Matthew.
What I wanted to say is I'm catching up on my reading of Scientific Americans, and the article from the June 2016 is about how climate change is causing conflicts, and the fact that our military has to take climate change into account when it decides where the hot spots are going to erupt. And I love, there's a very prescient paragraph right at the end that talks about, the election's in November. What is the president going to do afterwards? It's like, it's ringing true now, so everyone needs to find that article from June 2016 and just see how accurate they are talking about the current presidency, even though they had no idea who the president would be.
Yeah, I mean, when it impacts your long-term strategic planning, which I believe is what you're talking about, I mean, do you really want to argue with that? Do you want? Oh no, I know,
Correct.
I know more about this than all the generals do. Blah blah blah.
Well, and he either he just outright lies about it, which he's completely comfortable doing, or if he gets cornered on one of those rare occasions where a reporter will actually try to nail him to the wall about it and say, that it's pretty much settled science, right? That like 98% of the people in the field believe that climate change is happening. He'll default to, it's very complicated and nobody really knows.
People told me something once, so
Yeah, whereupon you say,
He doesn't even know how to be president.
The
So
thing
how
about
can you
Donald
decide?
Trump, the thing about Donald Trump is that in his mind, no one is allowed to be smarter than him. So if evidence arises that someone is smarter than him, cognitive dissonance arises, and he must deny that they are smarter than him.
The thing is,
We package them as being smart, but oh no, it's not actually settled science, so they just have a different opinion. So he really is just trying to reinforce his belief that he is the smartest and the most awesome person in the world.
the bigliest.
Yeah, I actually wrote a blog about this not that long ago. Taking a look at what happened to Cactus 1549, aka US Air 1549, and what went on with Sully Sullenberger, because I mean, you don't argue with that. You can't. I mean, you're 2,000 feet above the ground, and you've only got so many options unless you want to plow into a building. At some point or other, Trump is going to run onto a situation he can't spin. He is going to be faced with a reality that he doesn't like, but he's responsible for acting on. And I want to see what happens when that comes down.
No, my fear though is that whatever that's going to be, it's probably going to mean that lots of people are going to get killed. Or
Yeah.
Joe,
Lots
More
more.
than likely, you are very, very correct.
Yeah.
Hopefully, it does not involve nukes.
Yeah. Well, to keep it on climate change for just a second more, and then we can talk about. I know before he dropped out, Chris mentioned Trump sort of casually mentioning, "Oh, I'd like to break up the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals." He tweeted, I think last week, Trump did, "Oh, the environment is important. We're going to protect the environment, but the economy is important too, and growing the economy helps the environment." Since when? when has focusing only on the economy help the environment?
I want to know why you can't do both at the same time.
Exactly.
Yes, you can. You can actually. There are times when you invest in new technologies, clean technologies. Yes, you can grow the economy and get cleaner at the same time. In fact, here's the thing: as certainly, well, I shouldn't say certainly, but likely the only person on this panel who's actually done this personally, and definitely. No one in the Trump administration has. I personally have reduced emissions, and I don't just mean in my house. I mean on an industrial level. And so the thing is that what bothers me is when I hear this bullshit, and I've been hearing this for 30 years. This bullshit that they spin that like if to be clean is to automatically be anti-business is such horseshit, because the best way to cut emissions is to make your process more efficient, which means there's less waste. So you need fewer raw materials, that saves you money. There's less waste handling, that saves you money. Less wasted product and all that, and more stuff you can sell. So it absolutely can be done, and it's in companies' best interest. But it's why I rankle though when I hear the Republicans are like, "Oh well, run the government like a business," which is stupid on its face because they have a different goal.
It's not a fucking business.
Right.
It's a service.
But also they act as if like businesses are all run really well. And I'll tell you what, man, I go in every kind of industry. I do plastics, I do specialty chemical, I do food, I do pharma, water, wastewater. I've been in most types of facilities, and the idea that like businesses are all run well, oh my God, is that bullshit?
Yeah, and consider that we're talking about Donald Trump trying to run the government like a business. Donald Trump, whose business strategy is to be really bad at business so that he can declare bankruptcy and reap the benefits, which involves screwing his people over.
Precisely.
Which he then brags about.
He doesn't have a business. He has real estate.
He doesn't even try to hide it. When people called him on the bankruptcy, he says, "Yeah, I use the laws to my advantage."
That's called being a smart businessman.
Yeah.
It's also called being a jerk.
The funny thing is, though, I mean, he's the most obvious because he's a big buffoon and he's blustery. But you look back at Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney was no different. How did Mitt Romney make his money? Corporate raider. He was a
exactly.
And so actually, I got a client.
Light mediocrity.
I mean, I'm probably going to lose at the end of this year, because basically one of their competitors came in, bought them, moved their most valuable assets to another facility, and it's going to be shutting it down at the end. If they can't find a buyer, they're shutting it down at the end of the year. So all those people at the site, they already let go like half the people. So all those people are going to lose their jobs. Site's going to be gone. All this. And so somebody made money, but did that grow wealth? No, it didn't. It actually destroyed wealth and displaced a lot of people. So a small number of people will make a lot of money, and everybody else gets fucked over.
Yeah,
it's amazing how deregulation automatically leads to robber barons.
Yeah. Yeah, it's weird how it's interesting how all these regulations that they want to get rid of. I guess we forgot why we put them there in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think some of them seem to be pro, like there's the libertarians have maybe one point in that there are regulations that make it harder to start a business, but then there's a bunch of others that they want to do.
Yeah, but they also keep you from poisoning people, so that's pretty good. But you are right that people seem to forget why we have the regulations. Once the air is clean, they're like, why do we bother protecting the air? Look at how clean the air is. It's like, because of the regulations. Think of the vaccines. Once all the diseases go away, people are like, oh, now that we don't need vaccines, because where's
why do we
polio?
need to stand in line at the airport?
Regulations are like when you have a really good IT team in your business. When you have good IT people, it looks like they're doing nothing because they're proactive and they get on top of things, so you don't have your computers aren't crashing, the network's not crashing, servers aren't crashing because they're on top of it and they're
solving problems before they become problems.
Right. And they've set up contingencies that if there is a problem that they can very quickly shift, and so the disruptions may happen, but they're kind of transparent to the user and the users don't see them. So you think, oh, well, what do we need all these IT people for? Because, we never have any problems. And of course, it's...
Well, Steve, I know that, while Bill Maher isn't your favorite guy in the world, the one new rule that he had a couple of weeks ago where he talks about, dick moves. And, you mentioned, the business of rolling back the mileage, rolling back the, pollution of the streams.
Yeah.
Pruitt is now talking about asbestos.
Yeah.
Hello? Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's why. That's the thing. That's what sort of shows you why they're full of shit when they talk about, some regulations are good. We just want to find the really onerous ones and get rid of the ones that are stopping jobs and stopping economic growth. And when you hear them, when you judge them by their actions, it's clear they're not going after these little arcane regulations that maybe, were put up 20 years ago that nobody really thinks about. They're talking about like basic health and safety protections, basic environmental protections, doing away with regulations that were meant to help keep water supplies clear and stop pollution. And it's just maddening to hear Trump say, oh no, it's just about, it's about spurring job growth. And yeah, we're going to keep some regulations, but they're talking about getting rid of some of the most basic environmental protections that have been in place in some cases for close to 50 years. And you can see the results of them. You can see you can look at scientific data of levels of air pollution 30 or 40 years ago versus levels of air pollution today and see that it's better.
It's like the opposite of that though, because you don't see it because the air is clean and the water is clear, and because they don't see.
But there are people alive who remember smog.
And it's not just
right. Yes, exactly.
It's not just that though. It's the time between when the action was taken and the benefit we're getting now. We're so removed from that that nobody makes the causal connection. And they figure, oh well, it's fine. We can go back to doing what we were doing. Or in Trump's case, they don't even care. I swear this guy would reinvent Johns Manville if he could. Never mind the coal industry. And if you don't know Johns Manville, their primary product back in the day was asbestos.
Yeah. Well, the thing that gets
I thought
me
you were talking about the town near me named Manville.
Huh.
Oh boy, John's Manville over there.
The thing that gets me the most about something, wanting to bring back something like asbestos, what's so stupid about it, is it's not even the best alternative. Like, it's not like, hey, if asbestos came back, it would be the best product to do what it did. There's the alternatives that have replaced it are so much better in the first place. So it's kind of like when the incandescent bulb, they kind of got phased out and said, okay, you can't manufacture more than like 25-watt bulb incandescent, and all these right-wing lunatics went out and like hoarded light bulbs as if we were turning off light, maybe light's illegal or some bullshit. Like I got LED lights in almost every spot in my house. I even got rid of my compact fluorescents because the LEDs are even better. They're brighter. Because they come on faster and they don't have as much mercury. So
they shouldn't have any mercury and they'll last forever. Right. I've had CFIs go south on me. These things, they're completely solid state. What's to go wrong?
Exactly. Yeah, the
aliens, demons.
Who jumps?
Yeah, the CFLs have not been as good as things, but the LEDs are amazing, and they use a fraction of the power, and you can tell that because you can touch them when they're lit and not burn your fucking fingers off. But somehow it's like, so really it doesn't have anything to do with business at all. That's a red herring. It's about, I don't like being told that I can't do something, even if it's something that's harmful. It's like these cold
it's just change. Any change is anathema.
And he doesn't like to acknowledge that people are smarter than him.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not just about Trump, though. It's not just Trump. Yeah. All the whole right wing is doing this shit.
Yeah.
And now for something completely different. My cat is in the background.
Well, that's what gets me about libertarians sometimes, because, well, most of the time, because because libertarians may correctly say that my right to swing my arm ends at your nose. Great, I agree with that. It's one of the principles of libertarianism I concur with. However, then any instance where we would actually hold someone to account for actually hitting people in the nose, aka poisoning the air or the water or the ground, they're like, no, we can't do that. No, that's the personal responsibility part that you guys pretend you give a shit about.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I owe you a compensation, and I shouldn't be allowed to piss in your well without because it's your well.
It seems like libertarians are the most frustrating to argue with.
Well, that's what frustrates me about people. A lot of libertarians are like this, and a lot of people just in general, no matter where they fall on the ideological spectrum, are like this, where they only consider things in theory, and they never consider things in practice. And if you're talking about like a social theory, like or something that would be relevant to the way people interact and live in society, and you're not considering how the practical applications of that would go, then I just don't see what's the fucking point. Why are we even having this conversation? It's just intellectual masturbation. If all you're doing is you're defending principles without considering how they would be applied in real life and what the effect of that would be and what that society would look like. So it's easy for a libertarian to say, oh, just give everybody, just respect everybody's individual rights and just let everybody do whatever they want. Okay, that sounds great, but how does that work?
But
until they start hitting you.
Yeah, well, the thing is, you're talking about people. You're treating people as though they are in a vacuum when they're not. I mean, there's a thing called a society, and we sort of all live in it together. And people interact, and sometimes the interactions are beneficial, and sometimes they're untoward, and there needs to be some mediation there.
You might interact, sheeple.
Right.
My friend who was my friend who was a Marine had a really good point about the libertarian view on guns, which is they all have a fantasy like, oh no, there's a bad guy, I have to shoot him. But I have my concealed weapon, so I can do something about it. But it's really, really difficult to tell who shot, and then as soon as two people are shooting, then how do you tell who's the shooter? And then like you said, in practice,
this is a road we've been down more than once.
Han shot first.
Yeah, Han did shoot first. And you know what? I'm glad.
It was the Wild West, not the friendly and polite West.
I'm glad that Han shot first. But you know, had it
Yeah.
And the thing, Joe, you sort of brought this up, but I mean, as engineers, we have to be pragmatists. We have to be able to live in the real world. We're dealing in the real world. We're solving problems in the real world. And you have to acknowledge all the variables if you're going to be able to deliver a solution that is going to be, number one, effective, number two, long lasting. I mean, I'm 30 years field service. I mean, I'm about to go do that same thing again. But because my customers know that I deliver solutions that work.
Right.
And if you don't do that, you're simply not in the business for very bloody long.
Well, that's the other thing too, because the thing is, it's one thing, obviously principles are important, but if your principles are on a weak foundation, then they're not worth anything.
Yeah.
So you can spout a principle, but if it never actually works in practice, then your principle is probably inaccurate, or the model is missing some elements. Like one of my favorites, and this is actually something that I will concede at its face, it's actually real, but there's a problem with how it's applied. The Laffer curve. That's the thing that they love, the Laffer curve. Well, it is actually it is true. Okay, if you have zero taxes, you'll have zero revenue. If you have 100% taxes, you have zero revenue, and there's going to be a curve in there. But here's the problem. That's great, but in order to make use of that, you have to know, one, the shape of the curve, and two, where the fuck you are on the goddamn curve. so saying, because otherwise you get into this thing, well, cutting taxes always increases revenue. No, and that actually doesn't even follow what the Laffer curve says. If you are above the optimum point and you lower taxes, not as long as you don't go beyond the optimum point, then revenues will go up, and that's true. But if you don't know where you are on the damn curve, and also the curve is not fixed, it's dynamic. So you have to know a whole lot about the economy, the current state of the economy, where it's headed and where it's been, and all this kind of stuff. And I would think in practice, I don't think we ever know that. the only way you could really ever do it is if you did a test. You said, okay, I'm going to take some data points. We're going to adjust the taxes and see what happens. We're going to adjust the taxes the other way and see what happens, and all this kind of stuff. But we don't ever do that. It's just kind of random and bullshit. It's all hokum. So it's basically it's something that's a principle that's true and worthless. It has no practical application. You never have enough data to know where you are.
And the big problem with that, Joe, is the fact that number one, it's too complex. You can't communicate. Number two, you can't really communicate it to the people. And number three, the people hear lower taxes. Oh, goody! Everybody's thinking in simplistic terms, and simplistic doesn't work. I mean, I wanted to sum up what you were saying in one word, and there's a marvelous word for it. It's pragmatism.
Absolutely. Well, we talk about simplicity. Actually, that was another thing I was on about, is that people, I've come to the conclusion anymore, if I hear somebody just lay out something that's simplistic, I immediately can write them off as their meaning. It's one thing if you use blue sky and you're just trying to be broad, but and Trump really, he encapsulated this idea this week. I thought this would be easier. Well, no, it's fucking not.
Like, who gave you the idea that this would be easier?
Trump thinks everything he does is going to be easy because he's Trump and he's just going to walk into it. It reminds me about there's this. If anybody here has ever seen the movie Brubaker, there's this intense interaction between a black prisoner and Brubaker where he's saying, follow me, because he's accusing Brubaker of saying, well, follow me because I got it all figured out and I'm going to take care of it. And then he gets in his face. He says, the only thing you're going to do is get people killed. And at least Brubaker at that point looked back at him. He says, you may be right. The thing is, Trump could never do that because somebody cite me a time when Trump admitted to being wrong.
But see the thing though is I think
he fixed the birther thing.
The problem with Trump, the biggest problem with Trump isn't Trump. The problem with Trump is not. I mean, he's hopeless, but he is just like, he's not the cause. He's the symptom. He's kind of you take the worst of everything we've done in the last 100 years,
and then you lump it up and congeal it into a person form
with shit hair and a tan, and that's him. But the stuff he spouts, he didn't come up with any of this stuff. That's the thing. He's dumb, but he's just the icing on the shit cake. That's it.
To a certain degree, what he is the embodiment of the Dunning-Kruger effect as expressed by the voters who voted for him and, given rise into the person of Donald John Trump. I mean, it's Dunning-Kruger up, down, and sideways.
Yeah.
I personally prefer to think that the J stands for jackass.
My name is John, and I approve of that message.
Well, see, the thing.
Let's rag on Paul Ryan for a while.
Well, I was going to say, the thing about simplistic thinking, and I mean, there's simplistic thinking, and it's not just owned by one political ideology. So I look at the recent election as to where we got where we are, because basically the far right and the far left have this really simplistic view of how things get done. So I'm on the left. So on my side of the fence, I heard people, it was just like, oh, well, it's just easy. We'll just do X. And it's like, well, no, we have to overcome all these things. There's people who aren't on our side and the blah, blah, blah. And, or even stuff like, this was mind numbing. So we're focusing on, we're looking at the presidential primaries of Bernie and Hillary, wherever you fell on that. I don't care. But I was like, well, we also need to look at, the down ballot races. There's a House, there's a Senate, there's the Democrats had a really good chance not only to take the Senate, but to really just be crushing. They take have 53 seats, really be way ahead. So they have a little bit of cushion. And I had somebody actually say to me, well, we can focus on that after the presidential primaries over. I'm like, no, you fucking can't, because 42 of the 50 states were done. Their primaries were over. So your chance to get whatever you wanted, whether you were progressive, liberal, centrist, Democrat, whatever, your opportunity to shape those races was over. So the idea that, well, we're going to pay attention to this one and we'll look at those others after they're over. No, you can't fucking do that. You can't. But people want simple answers, and there are no simple answers.
Exactly. Yeah. And the thing is, because that trend is so pervasive. I don't, how do you start teaching people that, the superficial stuff, might look like it's going to work, but it really isn't going to work in the long term. And we need to start thinking more comprehensively, more in detail, past the surface, the whole 9 yards. It's, it's asking people to do something that does not come to them naturally. And that is a massive problem. And I'm at a loss to know how to solve it.
Because you know this, Lauren, you're an engineer. Even just say you get enough people to agree, like we're going to do X. Like, okay, here's something I think probably everyone on the panel is for is debt-free college.
Yeah.
Okay, well, how do you do that? I mean, it's not just, we're just going to, how are we going to fund it? What are the limitations? Is it means tested? All these different things. There's so many things because the thing is, you can have the right idea, and if you implement it wrong, it's going to fail.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at least Bernie obviously gave some thought to that and pushed the idea through. And, depending upon who you have in the front office and who you've got in the legislative branch, it's possible you could make something like that work. Right. But, I mean, we are, unfortunately, right now, we're light years away from that.
But also, Lauren, you also said, and the legislative branch. See, that's the thing. Is, you get whoever you get in there, you can't be just one person. You need a team. I mean, it's got to be comprehensive, and it can't just be one guy with a light bulb over his head.
Well, and what aggravates me, and Joe, you and I have talked about this a lot. I think we've even talked about it in Hangouts before, where like you just mentioned, debt-free college. There are people who would be slow or even unwilling to support a debt-free college proposal because they want something better. Because they say, well, debt-free college. No, we want tuition-free college. Well, that's great. That would be wonderful. But if we can get debt-free college now, why don't we just do that? And then we can build on that.
Right.
Yeah.
But yet some of those people who want the tuition-free, they'll look at debt-free and they'll be like, no, I'm not playing the game because you're not playing well.
Exactly.
And the perfect becomes the enemy of the good yet again. When you sometimes doing things in sequence will still get you to that same that same final result, but you have to be able to see the clear path, at least take the first step and take the next step, and then maybe we got a couple of side steps here because something didn't go right, but you still have the final goal, and it's just an adaptive process of putting one foot in front of another.
I mean, as I said many times, don't ask, don't tell, and DOMA, as shitty as they were, led to marriage equality.
Yeah, and I would say it's probably a legitimate criticism to say that when we got Don't Ask, Don't Tell, that we stayed there for way too long. Yeah. Right. I completely agree with that. If you say because I think after that happened, a lot of people were like, okay, well, this is just what we're gonna get, and it was just Don't Ask, Don't Tell for like 20 years. It just was, and people finally started to say, hey, why don't we just get rid of why don't we just stop banning gay people from serving, period? Then we won't have to worry about Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And you're right. If we hadn't done that first step, we wouldn't have gotten ultimately to where we are. So I think it's important, to be willing to take the intermediate step. And a lot of people, like Joe said, a lot of people just will refuse to take the intermediate step. They want to jump right to the end. But after you take the intermediate step, you also need to still have people reminding you that this isn't where you wanted to end up. Mm-hmm. This is just a step that you took so you could have a better shot at getting up there.
Mile markers are nice, but mile markers are they have their own purpose, which is to let you know, okay, we're this far along, but antelope freeways still a half a mile ahead.
Yeah, exactly. Don't if 85% of what you want is the best you can get, I don't see how it makes any sense to take 0% instead. Yeah. But at the same time, don't forget that you still have 15% to make up once you get that,
Well, it is. It's almost like somebody saying, okay, I want to go to the store, but I hate the idea of walking to the store so much. If I can't get a Star Trek transporter, I'm going to starve myself.
I'm just gonna die.
I'm going to the store. I gotta walk.
That'll accomplish something.
Look at how cute this kitty is.
Would you say slavery is an example where a radical step is the only one that's available There's no intermediate step.
But what if you're like, what? Well, you're not gonna let us vote? And you head, oh, we'll keep the slavery. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay, there you go.
I
Sorry.
think in terms of just getting rid of slavery, that might be a good point. I mean, I think it depends on what you mean by radical step. Like,
equality. You can't have equality.
Yeah,
immediately.
We did get rid of slavery in intermediate steps. First, we banned the import of slaves in the early.
That's true.
And so you could only, so people who had them were able to keep them, and they could sell them within the country, but you couldn't bring any more in. And then eventually you couldn't sell them across state lines. So it was shrinking, and that's why we had a war.
People just didn't want to give up those slaves. Weird.
And then
rich people just don't want to work.
And then the discrimination just became tacit, or it became more and more tacit.
Look, it's called job creation.
You probably heard like the bunch of growls and growls when I picked her up, and she kind of got me.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
Oh no. Perils of cat ownership.
Yeah, she's a Spitfire. The other cats in this house are rag dolls, so they don't really care. But Athena, she speaks her mind.
Let me go. Put me down, human.
Yeah, that's probably why she ends up dominating the other kitties, because they just kind of roll over, and she's just like, "What I say goes, for I am the queen."
Anya, quick question: are they the actual ragdoll breed?
Yes, they're the actual ragdoll breed. Okay. One traditional, one mink. So one white and lavender, and one cute little mocha with cream thing. She's like a tuxedo, but with brown and white. It's really cute.
My kitty is black.
Yay, black kitties! I love black cats.
I love these cat-related interruptions to our podcast. I think it really helps to
take the edge off.
It's the semicolon in the conversation.
Helps
Ginger
us
cats
God,
and
the
black
world
cats
sucks
are
right now. Have a cat.
helps us pussyfoot around the topics.
Yes, well.
Hey, now you're talking.
Hey, sometimes you just need a kitten break just to, decompress.
Bringing those puns in A game.
Bunch of Let's Players who do horror games. Like if something really spooks them, they'll just go like, "Okay, I need a break to look at kittens." I've seen Pewds do it. I've seen Markiplier do it.
I don't know if
under yonder tree.
I don't know if anybody. I'm sorry, I don't mean to talk over Lawrence.
Don't worry about it.
I don't know if anybody has seen any of the episodes of the new series of the Handmaid's Tale yet.
No, I have not.
How is that?
It's amazing. It's amazing, but it's incredibly heavy. Especially Hulu does sort of like the opposite of Netflix, where it releases an episode a week instead of all at once. But they release the first 3 episodes all at once, so you can binge the first 3 at least. And that 3rd episode is just, I mean, after watching that, I felt like wanting to look at kittens for like 3 hours. I mean, it's so intense. It's an amazing show. It's one of the most accomplished pieces of drama on television I've ever seen. But I mean, it's excruciating. And so you watch it and then you're like, "Oh, kitty. Where's the kitty?"
Is that like taking a theocratic idea to its natural conclusion?
Yes, exactly.
I haven't seen any of the series, but I saw enough of the movie to know that the series. I mean, I'm not even signed up with Netflix, so I'd have to go through that business. But the story, I mean, the movie itself was very much, I thought, cut of what sounds like very similar cloth, and
it's
on Hulu.
It's on Hulu. Yeah, it's on Hulu. Not
oh,
Netflix,
okay.
My dad recently showed me the movie Downfall, and it was really, really good. But I was like, "Wow, this is depressing and kind of terrifying in some ways." And thankfully, I had one of my blanket. Well, one of my blankets that my cat really loves, and so she came up and snuggled up to me.
Now, Downfall's about what?
It's about the movie.
The Final Days of Hitler.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. That's the one with that last scene that everybody lampoons with.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought that might be the
it's
case.
got a lot of more intense stuff, like
it's
Goaville's poisoning her kids.
Yeah, it's pretty.
So
Say something again, Jacob. Hang on, Jacob's testing his.
Testing.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Little light there.
It's a little low, but I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know what I missed. I was just saying one of the things I loved about the movie Downfall is, I'm kind of get tired of war movies after a while because they're kind of the same thing. But every once in a while, a movie comes along and it just flips the angle just enough.
Yeah.
To do an entirely fresh perspective on it.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing I loved about Downfall is show it from the German side. That's something that people don't normally do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what I thought was so profound about this movie is they depicted the Nazis as human beings.
Yeah. Which
is
they
actually quite terrifying if you think about it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It humanized them without making them
their
it wasn't defending them. It was just showing them as the complex people that they were.
Yeah, it was a really, really interesting movie, and I thought that the actors all did a tremendously good job.
The guy who played Hitler was just phenomenal.
Oh yeah, Bruno Ganz.
Oh my gosh.
He's a phenomenal.
Well, that's why there's two extremes that you end up having in movies. Like usually it's the cackling, mustache twirling, hand-wringing villain where they're just evil and they're not actually human. They're just a paper thing. And then
I think I will go tie 3 maidens to the railroad tracks today and then kick a puppy.
And then there's the other extreme where they kind of go too far and it's like, okay, they're trying to humanize the bad guys so much that they try to make them sympathetic. And I'm like, no, what they did was not sympathetic at all. I mean, I could be sympathetic for, in the case of Nazis, Germany, I could be sympathetic for like run-of-the-mill Germans who were duped. But like, the Nazis are people, and we can show that, but we don't have to.
Is it possible that you need to understand where they're coming from before you can bring an actual debate, if indeed that was something we needed? Well, I guess we do need to debate that now, don't we?
Yeah, we do.
So you need to understand where they're coming from.
Thanks, everybody.
Would it be okay to punch Hitler? Can we start there?
Well, actually, to your point about understanding, okay, we'll step away from the Nazis for a second. Let's look at...
Step away from the Nazis, Joe.
Yeah, step away. Put down the Nazis.
Put the Nazi down and step away slowly.
But if you look at terrorists, okay, like I'll talk about Islamic terrorists. There's the people who apologize for them and people that are just like dehumanize them. So it's like, okay, you can come down and say, okay, I understand why people are doing what they do, but what they're doing is wrong. So you could say, okay, you could understand people that are kind of, they're under juntas and they're kind of, they're seeing, the Western people bomb them all the time. And so they want to strike back. But then instead of going after like, maybe, if you want to say legitimate military targets, and then they, blow up a school bus full of children, then you go, you lost me. And then on the flip side, you can say, okay, like just say Israel, okay, yes, we understand you want to go get those guys because they just blew up a school bus full of children, and that's reprehensible, but knocking down their parents' houses and, scattering them to the four winds, that's not a good response either. So you can
just causing.
You can understand somebody's pain without saying that without accepting that it justifies their actions. You can say that I expect them to do something, but what they did, or what they chose, how they chose to act about it, was not defensible.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you understand why they did what they did, you are better equipped to prevent other people from doing that in the future.
Right.
I mean that which is just taking it back to pragmatism, and it doesn't mean that you accuse them or that you take their side or that you make room for them to do what they're doing. You understand where they're coming from, or at least you try to, and it helps to prevent other people from doing the same things. And, even in literature and drama, there are many examples of very complicated, fleshed out, humanized villains who are still depicted as utterly evil. I mean, and irredeemable, and you don't like. in the Jessica Jones Netflix series, Kilgrave.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God!
Fascinating villain.
Holy shit! As a fan of the 10th Doctor, seeing
Oh,
David
yeah.
Tennant be evil and really fucking sell it was
They take they really humanize him. They show you who he is. They show you his motivations. They let you inside his head to a certain
Yeah,
extent.
but they also show you that he's completely reprehensible and a horrible person and doesn't understand that other people have autonomy.
Exactly. He is still a fucking monster, but he's not just like a cartoon. You know, you see him as a person, but he's just
freaking
he's
great.
a horrible person.
He is a great villain and a horrible person.
Yeah,
I would almost cast him as addicted to his power. Like he just can't get over the need for the power.
Yeah, he just can't.
What I find the real dividing line between somebody who's sympathetic and somebody who's evil is really comes down to the difference in good and evil is what you're willing to do to achieve your goals.
Yeah.
So because I think here's the sick part. You know, even if we look at people who do evil things and we would consider evil, very often their motivation is, hey, I want to help my people, whoever their people have they consider.
Yeah.
So on that respect, you can say, okay, well that's in and of itself a laudable goal, but then it's like, and the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to stab every of the other guys in the face. You know, it's like, you lost me.
Yeah, okay.
The thing about it is that most people generally want to be good people. Most people are at heart good people, but things like ideologies or prejudices conspire to give them a skewed idea of what being a good person is.
And their
That's
priorities.
why you get people, you know, killing religious enemies or stuff like that because something gives them an idea of what's a good thing to do that's not necessarily congruent with general consensus of, you know, morality.
Like I've heard a few people point out, you know, if you really believe there is a hell, then killing a heretic isn't necessarily a horrible thing to do. Or like less, you know, like if they're out there like pulling people away from what would supposedly the truth faith, you know, it's one of those things to think about. Like,
well, it's also why, like, okay, obviously, I'm really not happy with all the people who voted for Donald Trump. I'm really not happy.
Never would have guessed, Joe.
We don't even have enough time for me to say how much I don't like it. But
step away from the Nazis, Joe.
Step away from the Nazis. But the thing about it is, if you really look close, I mean, and this is the problem we have with everything. This is the problem we have with sexism and racism and homophobia and transphobia and all these things. It's not really even the overt people, because again, there's people who are overtly racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic, whatever. They're obvious because they're like, and even the people who tend to side with them will you know, look at how many people out there that are like, oh well, the KKK and the Nazis were banned, but hey, I'm gonna vote for Trump, you know, because they don't connect themselves with that because it's more subtle. You know, there's a lot of people who say and do sexist things who aren't overt sexist. We might not, if we looked at them in context, you might not consider them as sexist, but they'll do and say, I've over the last 15 years, I've evaluated how I behave in the world and thought about things I've done, and I've never been homophobic, you know, like overtly homophobic, never been overtly sexist, transphobic, all this kind of stuff. But I've done things in retrospect that I look back and go, oh yeah, well, you know, not too cool. Yeah. Those were sexist things or homophobic things or transphobic things or whatever. But was I a homophobe? No. Was I a sexist? No. But I did things that crossed that line. But I would have labeled myself, and I probably wouldn't even necessarily have seen those actions as that at the time. In fact, I know I wouldn't have, because I wouldn't have done them if I did. But it took learning and some introspection, and so that's harder because it's easy to point at the KKK guy and be like racist.
Yeah. And that's what makes you a cut above most people, because you acknowledge the places where you slip up and you work to not do that in the future.
It actually goes past that though, because we were talking before about superficial solutions versus in-depth solutions, and it's exactly the same thing. Joe was willing to to look past the surface, and he was actually willing to look at himself in detail and say, okay, this is working, this isn't, I need to correct this, I need to adjust this, and that's what it takes. One of the things, and this has been a real bugbear of mine, is the fact that nobody really seems to teach introspection as a part of the growing process. I mean, it's something I had to do myself, and a lot of it to be able to get okay with myself over the years. But it's not something that our culture supports in any real meaningful fashion at all. And I see that as being, especially in this day and age, I see it as being enormously problematic.
But people
and compromise.
Yeah.
Well, the corollary of the same thing, really.
Right. So you also have an issue where people aren't often given the opportunity to have that introspection. You know, how many times have you watched someone who seems to be like let's say they're an LGBT ally, and they profess all these strong beliefs that are clearly allied beliefs, or whatever like that, but then like a video will surface about them where they drop some horrific slur or something like that against gay people, and people will be like, oh, now we see the real them. Like all that other stuff was fake, and because they've done this one thing that is terrible, that therefore that must be the real them, and then they will just there's a tidal wave of shit flooding over this person, which happens an unfortunate amount of times that I've seen, and it most of the time what that does is just drive them away from actually being an ally. It makes them what those people thought they were, because now they're like I try to be your friend and you bit my hand. Like, I'm going to back off now.
You know, while none of us has the obligation to engage any specific person, because hey, you know, we don't have to. But I think anyone, if one is to be whether an advocate or an activist, particularly if one takes the label of advocate, at some point you have to. You don't have to go with every person, and you can be selective. But like you said, I think there's a difference, and I've tried to explain to people that there's a difference between the guy shouting nigger all the time and the guy who makes the off-color joke. And like, you know what, the off-color joke guy, I might just pull him aside and say, that really wasn't so hot. Let's think about that. But to me, treating him the same as the guy who's shouting nigger all the time, that's probably not wise.
I think it's the difference between calling out and calling in. You know, and I think in certain situations. Yeah, go ahead.
This kind of reminds me of something that I saw a lot, like during the election, which was where some people who were liberal would be like, "Oh, I can't vote for Hillary because blah blah blah," because like, "Oh, her husband signed DOMA and all that," and blah blah blah. And I'm like, well, you do know that people
Trump is an actual Nazi,
right? And like Trump might be a closet Nazi, and like Hillary has evolved. Her position has evolved. Obama said that his position evolved. I mean, he came out pro-gay marriage partway into his presidency. It's, people can change.
We tend to fetishize confidence over, like, confidence is fetishized almost, and then we just punish when you're confident but you're wrong. But we don't allow doubt. Doubting is weakness.
It goes back to a point that we've brought up a couple of times in various contexts in this conversation of there's this urge to simplify everything, and I think a lot of us, and I would include myself in this from time to time, where we imagine this dichotomy between absolute confidence and just utter confusion, and people act like if they're not absolutely confident that they're right, then they're just completely at sea. And of course, in order to function in reality and to function in society, you have to be able to trust your instincts and trust your judgments. And you have to sort of tacitly assume that you're right about most things in order to just move forward. Right. But you also have to be open to correcting that. If something comes up and you realize, oh shit, I thought it was this, but it's that, then you need to be willing to make that correction. You can't be so wedded to your certainty that you're unwilling to make corrections. And I think that's the thing that we don't teach people, and that we don't encourage people to value is, yes, of course, just for pure pragmatism and just being able to function, you have to assume that you're right just most of the time. But if you're confronted with evidence, or a good friend of yours pulls you in and says, hey, what you said wasn't okay, or what you're doing is wrong, or blah, 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 you need to be willing to be open to that and to correct that.
Absolutely. And as Brett said, if somebody, just say we do find somebody and we call somebody in and say, hey, that wasn't so hot, we have to give that person the ability to correct themselves. Because if we don't, because I've seen this happen before, is like somebody who maybe wasn't even that, they were further away, you know, and they said, well, all right, I'm gonna try to, you know, think your way. Let me see how this goes, and they're still learning. And they said the wrong thing, and they immediately everyone's like, oh, they cast them back in the cornfield. So it's like, well, why am I going to bother changing if you're basically going to tell me that my change is bullshit? If you're going to tell me that or you're not going to trust me because I used to be on the bad guy side, now I'm going to be, I claim to be on the good guy side. You're going to be like, well, you're always the bad guy because you were once the bad guy. Well, then why should I change? Well, I'll just be me. I'll just be with my buds who think bad stuff because they accept me and you don't, and you won't allow me to change. One of the things, and this is something I saw, Steve. I saw you had commented on a little bit about Dave Chappelle's new special, and I hadn't seen it at the time, so I didn't comment because I had been ignorant, so I went and watched it for myself, and I definitely see the stuff that made people upset, and I know why it made people upset. I totally get it. But also the one thing though that I felt, I didn't have the same level of agita about what he said as a lot of people did, for one reason, because he was commenting about himself, and as much as it was an uncomfortable thing he said about himself, he was pointing out that there's a tough row to hoe, and not saying that that's a good thing. He's just calling out that that's a fact. Like one of the things he had said was that, basically making the point that where America is right now, there's still a hurdle to get overcome for true trans acceptance. I mean, gay people have come, they're not fully accepted, but they're further along the line certainly than trans people are. And look, I found for myself, it took me longer to understand trans issues than it did gay issues. Because you grow up in a society where you have this enforced dichotomy. You're a man or a woman, and you're male. If you're a male, you're a man, and if you're a female, you're a woman, and that's the way it is from birth. And fuck you if you even if you have feminine, if you're born male and you have some feminine traits, you're damaged. Even if you don't identify as the other gender, you're damaged. There's something wrong with you. So if you grow up in that environment, it's hard to understand.
It wasn't even that long ago that we were putting
reality, or that there's some people who don't conform and there's nothing wrong with them.
Yeah. So, Joe, there's a point I'd like to make in this. Who here has seen, there was recently produced a brilliant, I can't call it a commercial, but it was something done by Heineken. Has anybody seen that? It's a piece where you have
I haven't seen it yet.
You have a number of people, I think a total of 6 people declaring their positions on certain things. I'm a trans woman. I'm a person who thinks that you're either male or female. I'm a person who, believes who believes in feminism. I'm a person who, cannot embrace feminism. And then they bring them together without having, introduce them in any other way. And they have them put together a bar. And the bar looks like it's wonderfully convoluted. It's an IKEA nightmare almost, but it actually goes together well. And after they finish doing that, they say, okay, I want you to watch this, and they play each other's, statements that were recorded at the beginning of the short piece, and they present them with a couple of Heinekens and say, okay, you guys can either, leave now, or you can, sit down over a beer and talk about it. I thought it was stinking brilliant, because it makes the point that, the prejudices are so automatic in some cases that you forget that there are people behind, these points of view. And I mean, if there's any mechanism we can use to, get past that, I mean, whoever came up with that commercial had a brilliant idea as it came to that. And
just to kind of finish my point real quick, it's just that so I think it is important to remember that if we're in this, if we reach a certain point, not everybody else is there, and not everybody who's where we are is necessarily a bad person.
Yes, they are.
Here, I'll say, because so here's what I've done for myself, even because I'll even say people. I think people who are on the overall right side. But even then, they'll no. There's a lot of things that we don't really understand. People will make claims just because they want to support something. They don't really. So my thing is, if I don't totally understand something, the best position is to not interfere with it, because I want, and this is what I've been trying to tell people now that are having a hard time, for instance, like understanding trans things. I'm like, here's the thing: you don't have to understand it.
Just leave them the fuck alone.
Right,
Yeah.
right. It can be difficult to grasp because, again, from that dichotomy we've grown up in. But you know what? Here's what I do know: if I let a trans person be, and they are the way that they are, and I don't fuck with them, they're happier, and it doesn't cost me anything to leave them alone. So, wow, okay, I can let them be happy. I can not hurt them, and yay, we're better off.
If you can't say something nice, keep your mouth shut.
Yeah, and if you end up in conversation, with a trans person, if they are, open to like talking to you about like gender stuff, that's really cool, and you should totally talk about it. But don't ask what their genitals look like. That's just rude.
Because you wouldn't ask that of anybody else.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know about you.
That's true.
And I actually think that trans people, if someone asks you that question, you should immediately ask to see the other person's genitals.
Yeah.
Like
Compare
the Heineken commercial to the Pepsi commercial, where
Do ask preferred pronouns, because
Yeah.
At the start of every semester, ask preferred pronouns and what their genitals look like. It's
preferred pronouns, not genitals.
Yeah. Pronouns good, genitals bad.
I once heard this really great.
No, genitals are good. You just don't need to ask about it, Steve.
Genitals are good.
What do you prefer genitals look like?
Here's the other thing too. Here's another important thing for the trans denier. Okay.
Did you see the Pepsi commercial where
gender?
Yes.
Yeah.
Did you see that?
Yeah, it didn't bother me.
I just found it hilarious.
I haven't even seen it yet, and I'm not even sure I'm interested. I probably will at some point or other, but I mean, I heard that there was a controversy about it. And
it was a little anachronistic, but whatever.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like, so what I was saying to
Trans deniers, you were saying.
Yeah. Fuck, I had a point.
Don't you hate that? Don't you hate that?
Well, that's what or as a comedian, I have difficulty getting booked because I'm weird. But the people that I know that are popular don't try their best not to touch any issues, and their jokes are as broad appeal as possible, which tends to irritate me. But the
jokes.
The bigger your audience, the less.
I remember. Yeah.
The less impactful that you try to be, so you offend fewer people, and you don't actually say anything that's transfers to all medias.
Unless you're Louis C.K. apparently.
Well, here's the thing.
Louis C.K.
I remember what my point was. So the people that are trans deniers make a big deal about the pronouns. They're like, oh, the pronouns. Okay. So, yeah, sometimes you can get your tit in a ringer if you say the wrong one. But here's the thing. I really honestly believe that if people weren't trans deniers and didn't fuck with trans people and give them a hard time, they probably would be less sensitive about the pronouns. Because basically, if the conversation normally went, if you said, oh, you refer to accidentally call somebody he and it should be she, if the person corrects you and say, oh, no, I'm sorry, you should be addressed such state, and if you just said, oh, okay, they probably wouldn't mind the fact that you got it wrong. It's the fact that what generally happens is and then they give you I don't know about that, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's really the problem. That's really the problem, is because it's what follows on. I think people would be, because look, I don't know who's a trans person. So if I guess wrong, well, that wasn't because I was being a jerk. But if I continue to use it after I'm corrected, then I'm a jerk.
Some troll on Twitter once mistook me for a trans woman, and I was just like, "Sweet butch cred."
Oh
boy.
Oh.
Okay, I'm in charge of chat now. I am the captain.
I'm pretty sure Steve
I once
would be
heard this
shutting us down
great-
right about now if he were here.
True.
Oh, he would have
Great
shut it down 10
story
minutes ago.
once.
Unfortunately, I need to start packing. Well, finish
Oh.
packing actually pretty soon. Oh, there he is.
Steve's back.
Sorry, I don't know
Yay.
what's going on. I keep getting
Hey, Steve.
we were talking about browser problems before. I think Chrome just crashed on me. So
Yeah,
Oh.
Steve, I think maybe I don't know how many days your computer's been up, but it might be time to reboot.
yeah, I think I just rebooted like yesterday, but I don't know.
Oh,
I haven't rebooted in like a month.
well, that surprises me because I actually keep Task Manager up, and I can't help but notice that every time I get past like about 2 weeks up, the computer wants, you know what, guy, it's time to start over. You know, the cache is starting to get moldy. You know, what I mean, it's got crap growing out of it. How about a little Control-Alt-Delete here? You know, to
Come
date
on,
myself horribly.
Well, see, the
help
problem,
me out, buddy.
well, see, the problem with my computer is that like my back office is not insulated, so in the summer it gets really hot. So so the best way to cool the room down is to shut the computers down at night. So during the summer, I end up having to boot every day.
Yeah.
I just got to keep the cats away from my computer so that the hair doesn't get in the keyboard.
Oh,
yeah.
boy.
Like the other day, Athena, like she jumped up in my lap and she was purring and being all sweet, and like she never does the lap thing except like when I'm watching movies with a blanket on my lap. So that was pretty special. But then she was shedding all over my keyboard, and I was like,
I had a real issue with my old computer about that before I got this HP here. I had a Dell, what was it, a Studio 7, I think it was. And as some of you may know, I've got like 4 or 5 cats. And the numbers have varied over the years. But at one point, the computer was shutting down so often, it was overheating and overheating and overheating. And you know, it was to the point where it wasn't useful. So I figured, well, I'm going to take it apart and see what's going on. And you take a look at the fan, and I started fooling with the fan. And what do I find in the fan? Cat hair.
cat hair.
And lots of cat hair. Extracted the cat hair, and the temperature goes down 20 degrees because I've also got a temperature monitor that I've got on the processor. And you know, I fixed it! Yay!
You have to have magnetic fields that allow them to project hairs wherever they want.
I do an annual vacuum out because otherwise.
Yeah, I find cat hair in places that I know the cat's never been. I have no idea how it even got there.
It's called Brownian motion as applied to cat hair.
Exactly. It just sort of finds its way there. Oh,
yeah.
Well, anyway, we need to wrap this up. I thank you all so much for joining me, as always. All of you who are in the room with me, who are patrons of mine, I appreciate your support, and I appreciate you always. Most of the folks who come to these monthly hangouts are regulars, and I love seeing your faces every month and talking to you and hanging out with you.
And we love hanging out with you.
Oh, gee. James, I'm sorry your microphone wasn't working. I hope you didn't feel too overlooked or ignored.
I do.
Yeah, I'm glad that John got to get his say in. So anyway, thank you all for watching. If this looked like fun to you and you want to get in on this, this is something I do once a month as a special sort of reward for Patreon patrons of any level. And you can become a supporter of my Patreon campaign by going to patreon.com/Steve Shives. It really helps me out to produce more videos and pay bills and stuff. And I thank everybody here for supporting me. I thank everybody for watching. And we'll do this again next month. So
yay.
Thanks for coming. Take care, everybody.